Hi friends, now we discuss chapter 17. The name of the chapter, Goods and Service Tax. Okay, so let's start. And tax structure in India, chapter 17. Okay, so first part we discussed, and now we come to second part. Okay, now we discuss from it here. 14th Finance Commission. The 14th Finance Commission was constituted on 2nd January 2013 under the chairmanship of Dr. Y.V. Reddy, former RBI governor, with Prof. Abhijit Sen, Mrs. Susuma Nath, Dr. M. Govinda Rao, Dr. Sudipto Mandal, as the other four members. The recommendation of the Commission will apply on the period 2015 to 20, and its report has to be submitted by 31st October 2014. The broad terms of reference and the matters to be taken into consideration by the Commission are tax devolution and grant related references. The distribution between the Union and the states or the net receipts of taxes which are to be or may be divided between them under Chapter 1 Part 12 of the Constitution, and the allocation between the states and the respective shares of such proceeds, the principles which should govern the granting aid of the revenue of the states out of the Consolidated Fund of India, and the sums to be paid to the states which are in need of assistance by the way of grant in aid of their revenue under Article 275 of the Constitution for the purpose other than those specified in the provisions. Okay, clause 1 of the article. Measure needed to augment the consolidated fund of a state to supplement the resources of the panchayat and municipalities in the state of the basis on the basis of the recommendation made by the Finance Commission of the state to review the state of finance deficit and debt levels of the union and states and suggest measures for maintaining a stable and sustainable fiscal environment consistent with equitable growth, including suggestion to amend the FRPMs currently in force. The Commission has been asked to consider and recommended incentives and disincentives for states for observing the obligations laid down in the FRPM. In Commission is required to consider the resources of the central government, and the demands of the resources of the central government, the resources of the state government, and the demand on such resources under different heads, including the impact of debt levels on resource availability in debt-stressed states. The objective is not only balancing and the receipts and expenditure on. Okay. So revenues account of all the states and the union, but also generating surpluses for capital investment, the taxation efforts of the central government, and each state government and the potential for additional resource mobilization, the level of subsidies required for sustainable and inclusive growth, and equitable sharing of subsidies between the central and the state government. The expenditure on the non-salary component of maintenance and upkeep of central capital asset, and the non-wage related maintenance expenditure on a planned scheme to be completed by March 31, 2015, and the norms on the basis of which specific accounts are recommended for the maintenance of capital asset, and the manner of monitoring such expenditure, the need for insulating the pricing of public utility services like drinking water, irrigation, power, and public transport from policy fluctuation through statutory provision, the need for making public sector enterprise competitive and market oriented, listing and disinvestment, relinquishing of non-priority enterprises, the need of balance of management of ecology, environment and climate change, consistent with sustainable economic development, the impact of the proposed Goods and Services Act on the finances of the center and the states, okay, and the mechanism for compensation in case of any revenue loss, to review the present public expenditure management system and recommend including budgeting and accounting standards and practices, the okay, to review the public expenditure management budgeting and accounting standards and practices, the existing systems of classification of receipts and expenditure, linking outlays to outputs and outcomes, best practices within that country and internationally, to review the present arrangements of financing of disaster management with reference to the floods funds constituted under the Disaster Management Act 2005 and make recommendation to indicate the basis on which it has arrived at its funding finding and make available the state-wise estimates of receipts and expenditure. The Commission is required to generally take the base of population figures as of 1971 is in all cases where population is a factor for determination of devolution of taxes and duties and grant in aid. However, the Commission may also take into account the demographic changes that have taken place subsequent up to 1971. Okay, 14th Finance Commission recommendation. Okay, the 14th Finance Commission submitted its report by early 2015. It has advised for far-reaching changes for sharing of revenues between the center and the state. On the other hand, on the one hand, between the states. On the other, okay, center and the state on the one hand, between the states on the another hand. Okay, the advices apply on the period of 2015 to 20 and are likely to have major implication for center-state relations, for budgeting by and the fiscal situation of the center and the state. Successful implementation of the advices will advance the cause of cooperative federalism that the new government has enthusiastically embraced. Okay, the Economic Survey 1450 concluded some of the major recommendations, okay, as follows. It has radically enhanced the shares of the states and the central a divisible pool of taxes from the current 32% to 42%, which is the biggest ever increase in vertical tax devolution. The last into Finance Commission 12th and 13th, okay, 12th to 5 to 10 and 13 to 5, 10 to 15 had recommended a state share of 30.5%, increase of 1% and 32.2% 1.5% increase respectively in the central divisible pool. It has also proposed a new horizontal formula for the redistribution of the divisible pool among the states. There changes both the variables included and excluded as well as the weights assigned to them relative to the 13th Finance Commission. The Finance Commission for 14th Finance Commission has incorporated two new variables, 11 population and forest cover, excluded the variable relating to fiscal discipline. Implementing these recommendations will move the country towards greater fiscal federalism, conferring more fiscal autonomy on the states. For example, based on assumptions about nominal GDP growth and tax buoyancy, and the policy measures that are contemplated for 2015-16. It is estimated that the additional revenue for the states could be as much as 2 lakhs crore related to 14-15. On this, a substantial portion represents the difference that is purely due to the in change in the states there in the divisible pool. Preliminary estimates suggest that all trade stand to gain 14 finance commission transferred in absolute term. However, to assess the distributional effects, the increases should be scaled by population, net state domestic product, and at current market price, or by states' own tax revenue receipts. This will make the following effects on the state's revenue. Revenue. The biggest gainers when scaled by any of these indicators tend to be the special category states, mostly those in the northeast, and by other orders of magnitude. The major gainers in per capita terms turns out to be Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Sikkim, and the SCS special category states, and Kerala, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh. For other states, SGCS general category states. Clearly, this increase in taxes to the states is sustainable for the center only if there is a reduction in the central plan assistance to the states. In other words, states will now have greater autonomy both on the revenue and expenditure fronts. It is also possible to tentatively estimate that the 14 finance commission recommended would not do to net spending capacity of the states, where net refers to the difference between the extra effect of 14 finance commission transfer and the FFC transfer, and the reduces CAS that will be required by the FFC recommendation. Broadly, the special category states will be the biggest gainers. In addition, there are 9 states among the GCS which are expected to get more than 25% of their own tax revenue. A collective benefits of moving from CAS to FFC transfer is that overall progressively will improve. That is, on average, states with lower per capita NSDP will receive more than those with higher per capita NSDP. With this results from the fact that CAS transfers, which tended to be discretionary, were less progressive than finance commission transfer. To be sure, there will be transitional cost entailed by the recommendation of the CAS transfer, but in scope for resolution has been nominated because the extra FFC resource will flow broadly to the states that have the largest CAS finance scheme. The forward-reaching recommendation of the FFC, along with the creation of Niti Aayog, will further the government vision of cooperative and competitive federalism. That is the necessary, indeed vital, encompassing of cities and other local bodies within the embrace of cooperative and competitive federalism is the next policy challenge, which is believed to thus to be strengthened by the body of Niti Aayog. Contemplated Finance Commission, tax devolution, advising a formula to distribute the union tax. Okay. First, between union and the state is the most important task of the Finance Commission, as the shares of states in the net proceeds of union taxes is the predominant channel of resource transfer from the center to state. Divisible pool it is that portion that of gross tax revenue which is distributed between the center and the states. The divisible pool consists of all taxes except surcharge and cess levied for specific purpose, not of collection charges. Before the 18th Constitutional Amendment 2000, the sharing of the union's taxes revenue with the states was in accordance with the provisions of Article 270 and 272. As they stood then, this amendment altered the pattern of the sharing of union tax in a fundamental way, dropping the Articles of 272 and substantially changing the Article 270. The new Article 270 provides for the sharing of all the taxes and duties referred to in the union list, putting in a divisible pool Okay, so divisible pool, it is divisible here. Okay, so in English, the new 270 article sharing of all taxes duties refers to in the union list, putting in a divisible pool. There are some exception to it. Okay, the taxes and duties referred to in the article 268 and 269 of the Constitution, together with such as cesses and taxes and duties. Okay, Article 271 referred, and in any cess levied for specific purpose do not fall under the pool. The new arrangement of tax devolution come as a follow up to the recommendation of the 10th Finance Commission. Okay, 1995 to 2000, which the Finance Commission termed as the alternative method of the tax devolution. A consensus between the Union and State was advised by the Finance Commission for such an arrangement to be affected. When this arrangement to be affected, states were going to get extra 5%. States were going to get extra 5% share in the union taxes in the AMD. Thus, a serious demand come from them. Ultimately, okay, the AMD alternative method of tax devolution was accepted by the center. Okay, states were getting 5% extra, and then in the union taxes. Okay, to make the AMD irreversible, the government of India went for the 18th Amendment of the Constitution, grants in aid. Okay, हम देख लेते हैं कितना भी है, हम नेक्स्ट स्लाइड में बनाएंगे. ठीक है, तो भी बहुत सारी है. Okay, grant in aid. Okay, through the tax devolution, okay, from the divisible pool in the primary instruction, attend the issue horizontal imbalance of revenue accruing to the states. The grants in aid is a compulsory secondary instrument regarding the same. Article 2075 of the Finance Commission, the principles as well as the quantum of grants to these states which are in need of assistance. Different sums may be fixed for different states. One of the prerequisites for such grants in the assistance of the needs of the states. The first Finance Commission laid down 5 broad principles for determining the eligibility of a state for grant. The budget of a state as the starting point for examining of a need. The efforts made by various states to realize the potential. The grants should have the equalizing standards of basic services across the state. Any special burden or obligations of national consent within the states share should also be taken into account. Okay, 5 grants might be given to further any benefits, services of national interest to less advanced states. The grants recommended by Finance Commission are predominantly in the nature of general purpose grants, meeting the difference between the assessed expenditure on the non-planned revenue account of each state and the projected revenue, including the share of the state in central taxes. These are often referred to as gap-filling grants. The scope of the grants spreads over the years was extended further to cover special problem. Okay, following the 73rd, 74th amendments of the Constitution, Finance Commission were charged with the additional responsibility of recommending measures to augment the consolidated fund of a state to supplement the resource of local bodies. This has resulted in further expansion in the scope of the Finance Commission grants. The 10th Finance Commission was the first commission to recommend grants for rural and urban local bodies. This where the scope of grants in aid has gone for considerable extension over the time. Okay, fiscal capacity. The first fiscal capacity was called income distance. Okay, creation was first used by 12 finance measured by the per capita GSDP. as a proxy for the distance between the states in tax capacity. When so proxied, the procedure implicitly applies a single average tax to the GST-GDP ratio to determine fiscal capacity distance between states. The 13th Finance Commission changed the formula slightly and recommended the use of the separate average for measuring tax capacity, one for general category states and another for special category states. Okay, this fiscal discipline. This as a criteria for tax devolution was used in 11th and 12th Finance Commission, provide an incentive to states managing their finance prudently. The criteria was continued in the 13th Finance Commission also. The index of fiscal discipline is arrived by comparing improvement in the two of own revenue receipts of a state to its total revenue expenditure received relative to the corresponding average across all the states in the country. PC as a collaborator, while the 12th Finance Commission 5 to 10 was being set up, Government decided to make the Planning Commission function as a collaborator to the Finance Commission. One member of the Planning Commission was added as an additional member on the panel of the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission includes 4 members, including the chairman, as a link between the bodies. The arrangement was continued with the 13th and 14th Finance Commission. Okay, it is believed that this arrangement was greatly helpful in bringing in a better idea about the revenue imbalance of the states. Okay, while the government did not set up the Niti Aayog, no announcement came into in this regard. There might be some developments in this regard once the 15th Finance Commission 2025 is set up in future. Next we discuss direct tax reform again. Okay, next slide. So thank you friends, I think it will help to you. Okay, so thank you.